Hi, everyone. Tuesday, December 6th, Tarmac Tuesday. Welcome to NYJ Ground Crew. Joining me, as always, reporting from Jets Universe, Johnny Jets.
Hello, Jets Universe.
Hello, Johnny. All right. We know it. We know how you feel. We know you're a little disappointed. I mean, you look great today, but I could see it in your eyes. There's that level of disappointment. Even though we're 7-5, we are not 8-4. I'm going to let you take it from here. You start. You bring us home. I want to hear how you feel about Sunday's game.
I feel pretty good about Sunday's game. The reason I don't feel great right now, or completely great, is because of Coach Saleh saying that Zach Wilson will be on the field sometime in 2022. That is not consistent with the way the Jets performed on Sunday, led by Mike White. Thought they played heart, with grit, and it's Mike White's team, and they had a chance to win. They almost did. No moral victories, but I don't hear about Zach Wilson anymore.
Yeah, I said it the other day when we talked about it. I'm going to bang that drum yet again. I think it's, of course, it's just lip service. The rest of us know what we're dealing with here. I don't think he really wants to put Zach back on the field. I don't believe he is going to put Zach back on the field. But from a psychological standpoint, and this seems to make the most sense to me at least, is you're saying the right things because anyone in that locker room, not that they otherwise believe Zach is coming back on the field, but they would want their head coach saying the same thing about them. If they were going through tough times, there's something about being a player, especially in the NFL, especially with how short-lived your career could be, that your coach is saying the right things about you, that the idea is to get you back on the field. So we'll see ultimately what happens. But, it's interesting to hear you say about the game that you're feeling pretty good. You felt like this was a good Jets performance. Is that what you're saying? Or,
Well, I mean, it wasn't consistently good, and it wasn't great, and no loss can be considered good in an absolute sense. But the fact of the matter is, as we discussed before kickoff, I felt that the key to the game was to establish the run, and that would keep the Vikings defense honest, hopefully, and that would allow Mike White to be Mike White. But LaFleur, he got away from the run very quickly. I understand the Jets were down 20-3 at the end, near the end of the second quarter before the Zerline 60-yard record field goal. But to me, that's not justification for getting as much from the run as they did. But the fact that the Jets did not fold like a cheap suit, the fact that the Jets came back, the fact that Mike White put the ball in the hands of his receivers most of the time, the fact that they were in the red zone 6 times, and that they only got in once, and that's why they lost the game. But they did get down there, and the majority of those times were in the second half. They didn't give up, showed a real tenacity. In fact, the end of the game, the interception at the end of the game, for those of you who are under 150 years old, it was very similar to the end of the 1981 wild card against the Bills when Richard Todd was intercepted by Bill Simpson, just about where the Vikings defensive back intercepted Mike White for the last play of the game. So that kind of game had a very similar, letdown at the end. But obviously the stakes were higher, but it was reminiscent of a team. Because in the 81 wildcard game, Bruce Harper fumbled the opening kickoff and was running for a touchdown on that kickoff. The Jets were down big. They came back. They battled back only to lose at the end on an interception near the goal line. So, yeah, it had the feeling like this was a team that could make the playoffs that lost against a now 10-2 team. I know that a lot of people see the Vikings as pretenders, but the fact of the matter is they are, at least record-wise, one of the best teams in the National Football League.
Johnny, that's why we got you here. It's that kind of symmetry in history, bringing it up, of Jets losses, of what it feels like, 40 years ago. All right. To me, and I'm with you, and I really love everything you said, and I feel full-hearted about this game too. I mean, obviously, no one wants to lose. No one wants to be in the position we're in. You want to have that feeling of obviously being 8-4 and a much better position for the playoff race. But yes, full-hearted. To me, this was a game of moments, and sometimes, that's what happens when you're watching an NFL game more than any other. And I picked out a few, and I'm going to add them to the stream here, and we're going to talk about them. Not everybody watching live, so we're actually going to list these off as we talk about them. But there were so many other moments than these 10, but I'm putting these 10 specifically on the screen, and I want to get to them one by one. Number one, the Corey Davis holding penalty. I mean, that really started the game, and it's interesting because we talked about just the other day, of course, about Corey Davis, what it means to have him over Denzel Mims most of the time on the field, and how good he is as a blocker. Yet there he was with a big holding penalty right in the beginning of the game, and we know what that led to because it put Mike White in a position to have to throw to him a little bit deeper, and what happened? Yeah, the interception off that deflection. Number 2 on the list. A little slowed down, slowed down tape showed that it absolutely was pass interference, but not blaming the refs. Hard in the moment to throw that flag, certainly when it happened. It was interesting. I mean, it happens every once in a while. You're going to get a deflection like that, right? Number 3 really jumps out at me that this moment. George Fant replaced Max Mitchell. Max Mitchell, everybody's so excited to have back at right tackle, and he played only 30% of the game. And it was an interesting time to put him in the game. Obviously they felt something wasn't working. They felt he was either getting beat around the end for some pressure on Mike, or the running game wasn't working a little bit better. But what happened when he does, and George Fant had been out for quite some time, he came in and a huge penalty. Another, one of those 1 in 6 red zone opportunities you're talking about, the block in the back. And Berrios and the announcer did a great job. I remember watching the game talking about how it was Berrios' mistake, because he was supposed to cut back inside and he went out and Fant didn't know what to do. So he ended up pushing, a turned around defender, and the block in the back brought us back and obviously took us out of the opportunity to make the touchdown. But I'm going to stop there. Let's just hear your thoughts on these first 4, because again, these were key moments from some big players, who you expect to make bigger plays.
Well, we've had such anticipation about Corey Davis coming back, so I'm going to focus on him. He definitely had a big presence in this game. He made a lot of really good plays. So it's definitely obvious what he means contributing to the team. I will point out in defense of Denzel Mims that on the long Garrett Wilson play, that it was Denzel Mims that was blocking in front of him, and it kind of looked like he blocked the defender to force Garrett Wilson to step out of bounds on the way to a would-be touchdown. But that said, Corey Davis definitely stepped up on his return this past Sunday. It was great to see.
No doubt. All right, we'll keep it rolling here. The Jalen Reagor bomb. Jalen Reagor, the much maligned Jalen Reagor, who didn't have quite the trajectory everybody expected him to on the Eagles, got traded over here, hasn't made a huge impact on the Vikings, but here he was on a massive play, on a 38-yard bomb, where our safeties has done a very good job since the first 3 weeks of the season, where they were paltry, let's call it like it was, but here they were kind of out of position. That play happened, and then obviously the Alexander Madison TD run. I think that was the time frame of the back-to-back of ultimately what happened. And I mentioned here Rankins, Sheldon Rankins. Talk about him the other day, right? I mean, it was hard having him off the field because he's having such a better year. And I'm not saying that it was totally his fault, but the interior line, especially in that first quarter and a half, they gave up a lot of running yardage, a lot of yardage on the ground there, and not great. And that was, again, another big moment. And suddenly we're in a much bigger hole, down 20-3. And then Zuerlein comes back, kicks a 60-yard field goal, which was just incredible to see. I mean, he was 5 for 5. He's been amazing all year. I'll stop there for a moment. Let's hear your thoughts.
I think there's all really good points. I'm just looking up and down the list, and I don't see Elijah Moore stepping out of bounds, or landing out of bounds. So I'm sure we'll get to that at some point.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is a game I could have put this 15, 20 deep, right? You're not going to see Braxton Berrios' drop 4th down catch on here. A number of things jump out at me. I mean, again, this game of moments, though, that happens all the time. But these are the ones that really jumped out at me because it helped the flow of the game. This put us at 20-6. And then there's kind of 3 things that happened after the fact that really, really, in my mind, were the total keys to the game. It was number 8 is a big one because the Quincy Williams hit on Cousins. I don't think this was talked enough, and I didn't really hear it on too many other podcasts, if at all. But I mean, Cousins was hurting after that, and Cousins was, well, in a word, he was ineffective for almost a quarter and a half after Williams hit him. There was nothing. I mean, the Vikings had nothing going on as the Jets were chipping away. And this is the point where we easily could have run away with this game. We could have come back very quickly, scored 2 touchdowns because we kept getting in the red zone and run away with this game, but we didn't. I mean, again, the bend don't break from what the Vikings defense was giving us. But again, that was a huge hit. Getting a guy like him back on the field, going full speed. I mean, again, he's so boom or bust because he takes so many poor angles often and missed tackles. But when he hits, man, when he puts someone out, and especially when we can get it to the quarterback, and there was no flag on that play, I mean, he put Cousins, in the blender on that one. And then, of course, and this is really, where I kind of align with you of that self-loathing feeling every once in a while. At some point, Cousins is going to wake up. At some point, Cousins is just going to need one drive to keep this game out of reach for the Jets or make them keep coming back. And that's ultimately what happened after a quarter and a half of doing nothing. Sorry about that. I should have had that on Do Not Disturb, but we're doing that now. On a on a quarter half of doing almost absolutely nothing, Cousins really led a very good drive. I mean, that's ultimately what happened. And then, of course, the Justin Jefferson touchdown. I mean, it kept him under 50 yards all game, but, you're only going to keep that guy bottled up so much. It happened on DJ Reed. I put his name here not because I'm shouting him out like, come on, DJ. I think he had a very good game. He's had a tremendous year. He did the best that he could, but I want to say it's like, there's a lot of chatter. There's a lot of talk about him, Jefferson and Reed sniping back and forth at each other on social media in the past couple of days. But hey, it's Justin Jefferson. At some point, the guy's going to get open. I thought Cousins made a tremendous throw right before it got to the sideline, and Jefferson made a really good touchdown catch. But that is a big, big, big moment. And then ultimately, again, we know so many big moments toward the end of the game. But man, that overthrow, I think it was to Corey Davis on the right sideline. You know which one I'm talking about? The overthrow where Mike just missed him. I was on an airplane at the time. I let out probably the biggest audible gasp of the game at that point, and everybody who was in 3 rows of me was like, "Yo, is this guy okay?" But no, I was not okay with that miss. You know which play I'm talking about?
Yeah, that did involve Corey Davis.
Yeah, that was a shame. I mean, 5 catches for over 80 yards for Corey, but that would have been a touchdown. I mean, he had him in stride, and I think that was the moment of the game that was everything, because if he had hit him there, I think we would have won that game going away from there.
Yeah, I think all of these are definitely important plays in the game. I think to me the critical thing about the Jets, why they got behind so much in the first half, was a failure to establish the run game. Was also a failure to really tackle on the Vikings running game. I'm having a senior moment here. Number 39 on the Jets, is that Parker or something like that? I forget his name, but what's that?
I think that's Will Parks, I believe.
Will Parks, yes. Yeah, I'm watching with my almost blind vision as to try to read the back of his jersey. He did not have a good game on Sunday, and he allowed a lot of Vikings drives to continue. He wasn't the only one. But I think that in terms of Garrett Wilson stepping out of bounds, that's something that you would rather not see. Definitely Elijah Moore landing out of bounds. That harkens back to Keyshawn Johnson's first primetime game, Thursday Night Football against the Redskins at the now Commanders at the then RFK Stadium. When he didn't realize that in the pros you have to get 2 feet in bounds. He thought it was like college. It was just 1 foot.
You know what? Looking back at that play, though, White could have done a little bit better. I mean, he just missed the throw a little bit more. It didn't need to be that far out on the sideline. Moore could have gotten that foot down, no question about it. Moore could have done a better job.
And it wasn't even close. He didn't even attempt to try to tippy toe along the sideline. So that was huge. And then on the final play to Berrios, Tyler Conklin was all alone in the end zone.
Yep.
I'm sorry, in the corner of the end zone. So I'm not sure exactly what has happened. I'm not the aficionado of Jets podcast that you are, but I haven't heard of from my sources or from the old school media that I listen to just exactly on that play why Mike White completely ignored Tyler Conklin at the end of the end zone. He was completely alone.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that. I mean, the next 2 subjects I want to get to are White and LaFleur specifically, but let's talk about White. Okay. Not his best game, of course. It wasn't a very good game. It wasn't even, I want to call it a good game, but it was decent. I'm going to land there for what Mike White did. And there's something to be said about the fact that this is back-to-back games of 350 plus yards. That is not something we could just brush aside. There's not a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL who are doing that right now, who even have the capability of doing something like that. That's a milestone. Now, first game happened on 28 pass attempts. The problem was this game was 57 pass attempts to get to the yardage he needed to, but still putting up 350 plus yards. That's the kind of guy I like seeing under center at an opportunity to do that. And if you need someone, and we've talked about this before too, who has to throw over 50 times, you want it to be a guy who could put up and make the most of it, and getting close to 400 yards out of it. That's not something to be taken lightly.
Yeah, I judge his game better than you do, it sounds like. I thought Mike White did not give up. He had no quit. He had guts. He showed courage. He showed leadership. No, he did not have no losing effort can be considered great ultimately. But and it did not have a good start to the game. And there were times throughout the game where he was not perfect. But he definitely showed that he's a starting quarterback in this league. And that, to me, anyway, he's a winning quarterback in this league. His team played hard for him. They didn't give up. They kept going, and they had a chance to win the game. Now, why they only scored once in 6 times in the red zone. That's
well, we're gonna get to that in a second, and I think a lot of that has to do with LaFleur. But sticking with White for a second, I do judge him a little bit more again than you do, because a lot to like. Decent's a big word. It's certainly above average. I'm going to put him in the B to B minus category for what this game was. But, he has his limitations, obviously, on the run. I think there were some things that he missed and could have cleaned up. He had a really good second half, but it was what I talked about again on Friday. It was that notion when the game is in the balance, are you going to be the guy who's going to lead the drive and win the game, or are you going to throw the interception? And, at the end of the day, he threw the interception. He didn't win the game. And a lot of that, it's hard to do. I'm not the one out there with the pads on, and I'm not doing that. But there are guys, who at times you think are going to get it done. And unfortunately, when I was watching that game, I just felt like, here we go. We're in a tough position. And, even with all the opportunities, I felt like he was going to throw that interception. And unfortunately he did. And there were a couple other things. Like I said, the 57 attempts, you don't want him in that position. You mentioned it. LaFleur left the run game, and we should have had at least 10 more attempts on the run game. And Elijah Moore had 2 receptions on 6 targets, and that's never a good thing. But to your point, he could have dragged that foot. Still, that was on Mike White more than was on Moore. But LaFleur, you talk about a guy who did not have a good game. Mike LaFleur is to me the culprit of why we didn't win this game. 22 points when it easily could have been 42 or more. Let's talk about him. Obviously, you mentioned it, 1 for 6 TDs in the red zone attempts. And why did it happen? Well, he was uninventive. Okay. And a lot of that was what he did. Again, you're going back to Berrios on second down and doing these end arounds, which at this point, teams are looking for. You're not getting the ball to your tight ends. Like you said, Conklin was open. Well, I mean, what do you have these guys for? Mims and Davis are 6'3". They're great 50-50 guys. You got to give them their opportunity. I get it. You want Garrett Wilson and putting him on an island, or more in space, or Berrios like it was on that 4th down. But you have these 2 massive tight ends who are good pass catchers who can get out there. And that's the point of having a tight end oftentimes in the red zone. And certainly the 2 larger receivers that you want to be throwing the ball upwards and letting them and go make a play. 24 total rushing attempts, should have been 34, right? Even after, as you mentioned, it was 20-3. And worse than anything, and this has been the biggest problem for the Jets, not just in this game, but all year, is third down efficiency. We are one of the worst teams in third down efficiency. And again, here we were 3 for 16 on third down per day, 3 for 16, and we were 2 for 5 on 4th down. This, to me, falls back on LaFleur. I got you. Yeah, you're in and out on.
Yeah, he did not have a good game. He got away from the run. It's hard. It's easier to defend against a quarterback when you don't have to respect the running game, and you can just focus on the passing game, especially when there are limitations to Mike White's game. As you've mentioned many times, he doesn't have the strongest arm in the world. So it really is about keeping the defense honest by establishing the running game, which the Jets do have a solid running game. So, yeah, LaFleur definitely gets pass happy times where it's not so much that he's uninventive, it's just that he thinks he's too clever. And, rather than just going to his big, tall receiver in Garrett Wilson, or to his big, one of his big tight ends, he gets cute and so forth. There definitely was a lot of points left on the table in this game. On your list, you mentioned Zuerlein's 60-yard field goal. It's nice to see a Jets kicker actually come through in the clutch. Looks like we got one. We let Nick Folk get away years ago. Hopefully the Jets have the good sense to keep Zuerlein around.
We got to let Myers get away up to Seattle years ago, too, when he obviously had his great run after.
He had a nice year, but he wasn't Nick Folk with the Jets.
That's true. By the way, he was not Nick Folk with the Jets. That's fair to say. On the other side of the ball, I was extremely impressed with the defense. And again, you can look at the first half of the game and say, really, were you? But, ultimately, yeah, because you made the adjustments at halftime. You clamped down. You got a guy like Williams who put the hit on Cousins and made him think about getting back in that pocket and making any throw. And you could see he was pretty jittery after that, other than that one drive he led to Jefferson. And in fact, we kept him under 175 yards for the game, and he had 35 attempts. That's pretty damn good on the defense. And, it's going to happen. We haven't been great against the run all year. We've been good, and we've been good when it matters. And, first half, not. Second, we were. But to me, the biggest thing, no turnovers. And that was really the key to the game more than anything else. We did not create a turnover. We had practiced, or the guys had practiced jumping on the ball, but we didn't create a fumble and even an opportunity. And there wasn't even an opportunity, really what looked like, to make an interception in that game at all. And I give credit to Cousins, because even though he didn't have certainly one of his best games, and we made him uncomfortable. He made the right plays when he needed to. He had some really good passes, and he just didn't put the ball in any type of trouble. But without the turnovers, it's hard to win a game, especially when we're the one giving away 2 of them.
Yeah, the Jets defense this season definitely has a pattern of behavior when the ball's on the grass or on the turf or on the carpet, they don't recover it. It is very frustrating, and it's definitely something that needs to change moving forward if the Jets are going to make the playoffs and be a force in the playoffs this year.
Yeah. Okay. I do want to say one thing again, going back to Saleh's comments about Wilson. Okay. And in the beginning of this episode, I talked about, the psychological factor of backing up a guy, and anyone in that locker room would want to hear the same if they were in a similar situation and they had to have, quote unquote, a reset. But there's something else going on here too. And I'm glad, White was named the starter basically for the Buffalo game pretty much last week, even before the Minnesota game. And obviously it was, it was really talked about again. Obviously, he's going to be the starter here, but Buffalo was Mike White's undoing last year. Okay, so I can understand not committing to him. And believe me, I'm not saying I want to see Wilson after this, and I'm not saying I want to see Flacco on the field, but I can understand yet because he's had these 2, very good to decent games. He's thrown up the 350 plus yards, which I'm extremely excited about, certainly. But Buffalo was his undoing last year, and he's got to go up there and get that monkey off his back, even if he is just a C or B quarterback again. It can't be D or F. So to me, that's why Saleh said what he did. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean that's a level of 4D chess that I did not ascribe to Robert Saleh's thinking previously. Perhaps I've been selling him short as far as the anti-logic contrarian theory that he's using to get the most out of his quarterback, Mike White. And if that's the case, then I'm all for it. What it sounded to me on its face is that he was cowering to the pressure from the powers that be within one Jets drive, that Zach Wilson is the face of the franchise, the number 2 pick overall. The Jets are on the hook for a lot of money with him. So he can't, he's not allowed to just come out and say Mike White is our quarterback till the end of time, or even the rest of the season. I think that the injury that Mike White sustained against the Colts last year was his undoing when he played Buffalo the following week. I don't think it was the Bills so much, although obviously the Bills are a better team, or one of the better teams in football. The Bills have been less dominating this year than they were last year, as evidenced by the Jets defeating them earlier this year with Zach Wilson at quarterback. So I don't think that it's completely impossible for the Jets to go up to Orchard Park and win that game. Nor do I see any basis to believe that Mike White would have a C or a D or an F game. I mean, to me, it's a question of, is the game plan going to be sufficient to open up the run, to keep the Bills defense honest so Mike White can be Mike White and Mike White has an A game? Or is he going to be throwing 55, 60, 65 times again because LaFleur is pass happy and gets away from the run, and then you knock him down to the B- territory?
Well, let's hope he doesn't get away from the run, because that's one area where the Buffalo Bills can be had. You can run on that team, and we should be running on that team. And obviously, Zonovan Knight, 2 great games, I'm going to say, back to back. I like the way the kid runs. He almost had 100 yards again. He certainly had well over 100 from scrimmage his first game out there. He's a good player. And I think James Robinson's still waiting in the wings, and you can give him the ball more than you did 4 times here. And Ty Johnson's a big factor, and Mike White likes to throw to him. I mean, I think he had 5, maybe even 6 receptions this past game, and he can be dangerous in space. So there's room to be had with those running backs. There's a game plan to be had, even again, if Mike White is average. But to me, C, it wouldn't be terrible. I don't want anybody to think that that's a bad letter when I'm putting on a C game if you're an average quarterback, if you're doing kind of what you're supposed to. No, I don't expect him to do that. I think he's playing above his weight, and he is better this year, and it is his 5th year, and a B game would be great, in my opinion. A would be excellent, superb, phenomenal, any other adjective you want to throw out there. A games are hard to come by, especially when you start the year as the 3rd stringer, but a C would be good. D, F, catastrophic. But to your point, stick to the run, get some guys out there, get 35 plus touches, even if you get down early in this game. Okay. We did it last week, and we're going to do it this week. It's playoff.
I think in the same way that you're lost in the sauce, perhaps I'm blinded by the light. I think that he's the goods. I'm not buying all this detracting talk about Mike White. Mike White has been kept on the bench, I feel, because he is not the 2nd overall pick in the draft and not the face of the franchise. I think that's what all of it is. I think that he's the best quarterback the Jets have. I think he's a legitimate starter in the league, and I expect him to play an A game more than he plays a B or a C or a D game. Blinded by the light.
Love that optimism. I feel like sometimes I get to be the one bringing it out on you. And you know what? I'm blinded by the Mike White light too. Again, I want to be clear about this. Back-to-back 350-plus yard games. Not to be taken lightly. Not a lot of guys in the league can do it. And he's somebody who could stand back there and find his receivers, to your point, and put the offense to work, the yards after catch offense, and especially with a guy like Garrett Wilson. And certainly I want to see him get Elijah Moore involved again one more time this coming week, because he's just too much of a weapon to only get 2 catches like he did last week. But it's playoff time. We're talking playoffs. We went through this last week, and we're going to do it again. We're going to bring up some graphics and go through who's left for the Jets to get to the playoffs. You keep talking about how the fact that they've got to win the AFC East, that seems further and further away. We'll see. I mean, if they could beat the Buffalo Bills this week, you're back in the thick of it. But, again.
Well, one of the reasons that Sunday was not the loss on Sunday was not the worst experience of all time. It was because as we've discussed before, it was an inter-conference game, so it does not diminished from the Jets' AFC conference record. But later that day, the Raiders of Las Vegas defeated the Chargers of Los Angeles, which was not only keeps the Chargers 1 game behind the Jets in their overall records, but also adds a loss to the Chargers' AFC conference record. If the Jets and the Chargers end up tied because they don't play each other this year, that would be the tiebreaker. So that was not something I was counting on. I was not counting on the Raiders to beat the Chargers. Ecstatic that they did.
Yeah, no, you're making a good point, but you're also jumping ahead, my man. Give me a minute. We're going to talk about the Chargers. I want to talk about the teams that are still out there. There's 3 teams that have to run the table to even be in the conversation, and they're not going to do it. And even if they do, I'm not too worried about it. And I'm talking about two of them specifically. That's Pittsburgh and that's Cleveland, because if they do, they end up 10-7. Okay. And the Jets still have to end up 10-7 to even make the playoffs, but we hold the tiebreaker over both of those teams. So really, neither of those teams are worth concerning about. You mentioned the other one team that is, interestingly enough, worth concerning about slightly, and that's the Raiders. And they, again, have to go 10-7 to think about making the playoffs, especially in the AFC. And they'd have to run the table to do that. And their last 2 games of the season, San Francisco and Kansas City. So I think they've got a bigger hill to climb than anybody. But let's start with this. Let's start with the one team who I think are back in the conversation to talk about, and that's the Baltimore Ravens. They're 8-4 right now. They're still leading the division, okay? But can we not see them, especially with this Lamar Jackson injury? Can we not see them potentially going 1-4 with the schedule? Here's who they've got left. They've got the rejuvenated Steelers. They've got the Browns. Never easy to play interconference, and let's see. I mean, Deshaun Watson looked, let's just call it like it was. He looked terrible when he came out this week. But, 2 games from now, is it going to be Deshaun Watson again, the guy who everybody expected to come back in and look a lot better than he did? The Falcons, probably the one game they're definitely going to win, and they've got them at home. And then the Steelers again, although they've got them at home again, and then against the Bengals. The Bengals, who look like the best team in the AFC right now after having just beat KC and probably have the front runner in the MVP race all of a sudden in Burrow at quarterback. So what do you think? I mean, is it possible for the Ravens to go 1-4, or are we penciling them in, putting them in the playoffs?
I'm penciling in both Baltimore and Cincinnati. I mean, anything's possible, but in Jets universe, I don't count on or bank on the competition helping in any way.
Yeah. And you know what? And I bring them up. It's a conversation piece, but I agree with you. I'm penciling in both Baltimore and certainly Cincinnati, who deserves it. So that just leaves that one spot left open, right? And at the moment, we know the Jets are still in the driver's seat. The Jets still hold the position. But let's talk about one other team, because it's worth talking about too. They're in our conference, of course, and that's the Miami Dolphins. I mean, they don't have the easiest schedule down the stretch. It's an interesting one. And look at who they're playing this weekend. The aforementioned Los Angeles Chargers, right? So interestingly enough, who do we want to win this game?
Well, I mean, at this point, it would be challenging for the Jets to win the AFC East. Certainly beating Baltimore and beating Miami will help in that regard, but it is still a long shot at best. So any opportunity to keep the Chargers from winning a game, I feel is a good thing.
Yeah. Well, and just call it like it is. If we're beating Buffalo, I want the Chargers to win, right? And if we don't beat Buffalo, I want Miami to win because that's just the reality of kind of what we've got up. But you look at their schedule. I mean, after the Chargers, they've got to go to the Bills. And again, we talked about this before. I feel like the Bills will run the table, if not have just one loss. And it's the Dolphins at Bills. So I'm penciling the Bills in to win that game. An interesting game against a rejuvenated Packers. Okay, the Packers are not out of the hunt. And even if they are, they've still got the best, if not one of the best quarterbacks on that side of the ball. And a lot of young guys are starting to produce over there. They've got a great running game. So, not going to be an easy game against the Packers no matter what. And then just an interesting one against the Patriots. We'll see 4 weeks from now where that all stands and who we'll be rooting for then. But that's the Patriots. And then, of course, us, the Jets, at the Dolphins. And that could be for all the marbles when it happens. But again, worth talking about. They're one game ahead of us. They're 8-4. But yeah, I mean, we'll see. I think they're worth throwing in here. It's possibly the Jets could jump back over them. Even if the Bills run away with it, it could be the Jets having the better record than Miami. And right now, we've got one win over them. Why not have two? And to your point, when you're winning in the AFC, and certainly when you're winning in your conference, that bodes well for us. But it really comes down to these last two teams, right? First, the New England Patriots. Oh, man, isn't that nice? Fourth in the AFC East. When did you ever get to see that? It's just great looking at that on the graphic and seeing that on screen, on paper. But they've got a very interesting game. We're just going to start with this one right off the bat. The Cardinals. At the moment, the Patriots are 1-point favorites, even heading to the desert like they are, flying and having to head west, but they are 1-point favorites. I mean, the Cardinals are a mess, right? They're a team that's essentially out of the hunt. I mean, not mathematically, but they're essentially out of the hunt. But, they've got two great receivers in Brown and Hopkins, both of them healthy and outside the ball. They're coming off a bye themselves. I don't know. What do we think? Can they, this is a Sunday night game. Excuse me. This is the Monday night game. So it's exciting. I mean, it's prime time. What do we think? Can the Cardinals win this game? Are they going to do it for us?
I mean, of course, the Cardinals can win the game, but again, I have no proclivity towards expecting the Cardinals to win this game. I expect the Patriots to be in every game and to win most of their games. They are a very scary team in Jets universe. That's not to say that they are guaranteed a victory out in the desert, but a long-suffering Jets fan cannot even think about the Cardinals winning this game. They got to just expect the Patriots to win.
Yeah, but I'll say this. I think Cliff Kingsbury could be coaching for his job in this particular game. If he keeps it tight or certainly wins, it's going to make a big difference for him moving forward because much maligned out there. It's an interesting thing going on out there. And it's never easy to travel across the country. And the Patriots have to do it again the following week when they go into Raider Nation. As we talked about, this rejuvenated Raider team, and he's got to play Josh McDaniels. And we always know how those games often go. When you're playing your protege, sometimes they get the better of you. So that'll be an interesting one. And then they end up with the Bengals, the Dolphins, and the Bills. And that's, by the way, I mean, 4 out of the 5 games are AFC. And you mentioned it's so important to win your conference. But, the Patriots, to me, they can easily go in 2 and 3 down the stretch. I'd count them out. But this is the one team that we're really looking at. And thank you, Raider Nation, for taking them down because there was an opportunity for the Cardinals to do it the previous week. And we know how that went. They lost on that 2-point conversion. But the 6-6 Chargers, this is very much who we're up against. We've got the Dolphins going to them. We've got the Titans going to them after that. The Titans are essentially, kind of no matter what happens to them, they might end up 9-8 this year and winning their division easily with who they've got to go against. So, we'll see where they land. They lost Burks to a concussion. I don't know if he's going to play in that game by the time he comes around to the Chargers, but the Titans are always a tough team to beat. Then they're at the Colts. The Colts are really falling off. And then the Rams come to them, although that's a home game for both, as we know. And the Rams are just called like it is abysmal this year, and they've lost all their star talent. Stafford and Kupp are out for the year, and then they end at the Broncos, and the Broncos, again, not good. So they've got the easiest schedule of anybody here, right? So this does not bode well for the Jets. But then again, this is a team that just keeps shooting themselves in the foot. You can easily see them going 2-3, or even 3-2, and 3-2, puts them at 9-8 and won't get it done. Your thoughts on them? Oh, you're on mute. You got to click off mute.
Yeah, thank you. The Chargers remain very dangerous. To me, it's all about the Jets handling their own business. I don't see a way that the Dolphins fall out of the playoffs completely. So I think if the Jets leapfrog over them, and that would just be a matter of seeding, which is important, but it's not a matter of getting in or not getting to the playoffs. With the Chargers, I think it is. I think it's if the Chargers make the playoffs, there's a real likelihood that the Jets don't. So yeah, I think to focus on these teams, this schedule of the Chargers, and see how that's going to play out is really important to the Jets moving forward. The Chargers have not been a finishing team this year. They've had a lot of opportunities to win many more games, and they just didn't. So if past is prologue, then that bodes well. But we'll see what happens the rest of the way.
Yeah, I mean, and again, they have really had a tough go of it in the middle of the season. But even if they go 3-2 at the end of the year, that still puts them at 9-8. And we know on these 7 seeds, you got to at least be 10-7. A 10-7 team more than likely is who's going to be the 7th seed. So if the Chargers go 3-2, good for them. But they're still going to only end up 9-8 if that's the case. All right, time now for just a couple of questions, and then we'll end the episode. Let's get to it. I got Richard Nakaya asks, kick the tires on Baker next year. He's obviously talking about Baker Mayfield, who just got cut by the Carolina Panthers. I think I know your answer, but should we be kicking the tires on Baker Mayfield next year, bringing him into training camp?
If Robert Saleh starts Zach Wilson at any point during the end of 2022 and then signs Baker Mayfield in 2023, there's going to be a revolt on this team that you haven't seen since Revenge of the Nerds. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Short answer is no. Don't kick the tires. I get that he's a number 1 pick and all that. And if you wanted Wilson off the team and you wanted him clearly as your backup as potential because you felt like he was going to run the West Coast offense, but will he? And Kyle Shanahan doesn't think he will because he just, he's down to Brock Purdy, but he just said yesterday, no thanks. We're not bringing in anybody right now, and certainly not Baker. It hasn't been on his mind to do that. I don't want any quarterback coming in. I didn't want Jimmy G being the one coming in, even when he was healthy and didn't hurt his foot. But the problem with him is he's never healthy. I mean, every single year for the last 5, he's got an injury. He's getting a little bit older, and no interest in having anybody else. I mean, the only guy to really talk about would be Aaron Rodgers if you're going to bring anybody up, and even him. I want to believe in Mike White. I want to believe in somebody else over somebody soon to be 40 who's costing $50 million a year. But in short, no thank you to Baker Mayfield.
It makes more sense to kick the tire with Jimmy Garoppolo's broken foot than it does to kick the tire on Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, no, you're bringing up a good point about that. Last question here from Joan Bianco. She wants to know, what are our 3 biggest offseason needs? Well, she's already thinking about the offseason. She's thinking we're making the playoffs, and after we do and make the AFC Championship game, what's going to get us to the Super Bowl next year? Our 3 biggest offseason needs. Johnny, off the top of your head, can you think of any?
We've got to keep Mike White as the starter. We got to lock him up, a contract extension or whatever it takes to keep him in house. I don't know what Breece Hall is going to be next year. I mean, he has an ACL injury, I believe, and the chances of recovery for that appears to be good, but you never know. That's why the shelf life of a running back in the NFL is not that long. Breece Hall was the MVP of this team before he got hurt. Having Bam Knight come in has filled that role to a great extent. So, keeping, the receivers in on the roster in case Breece Hall is not as great as he was, I think that's really important. And but as far as the third thing that we need to do, I don't think is known yet. I think it will be determined by how well this team is coached by Saleh and LaFleur more than anybody else down the stretch, how well Mike White performs, and whether, in fact, Robert Saleh is forced to play Zach Wilson at any point. Then we'll have more of an idea of what really is going on with these Jets and what needs to be done next year.
Okay, yeah, and I love all those points too. I'll go with these 3. I think both sides of the line, you need one more interior offensive lineman, as the backup to come up and fill in for Herberg. If he goes down, Feeney is okay. McGovern, he's nearing the end of his contract, and I'd rather have a better center than him moving forward. I think he's done an admirable job. He's done fine in the pivot, but moving forward, I'd love to have a real somebody, Mangold-esque, if you can kind of bring it back, because it starts with him on that side. You really need, a down lineman, a technique guy who is a run stuffer on the other side of the ball. And then to me, you need somebody in the secondary. I'd go with a safety, somebody real who's going to be a big difference maker. I'd love to see that, whether that's a free agent or somebody you draft. I think Jordan Whitehead has really filled the role very nicely. LaMarcus Joyner does not have a long future on this team. I'm not sure Ashton Davis does. You don't see him having any type of snap count. And I wanted to end the episode here, but we do have a live question as well. Vinny and the Jets. He says, hell no to Baker. He's listening to us. Question, do you think Jimmy G's injury becomes an issue with the Jets potentially signing him? Let's jump back over to what Vinny's asking. Yes, Johnny, I'm going to let you take this at the end. But yes, I think it becomes a huge factor. Again, I didn't want him before because of his health and his age, and he's always getting hurt, and he's never going to finish 17 games for you. And now he's out, and he's going to have surgery again, and you need to work him back again. Yes, I think that's a big factor. I would absolutely not want to bring him in, especially after this latest injury.
Yeah, I mean, it would seem that a broken foot would reduce the number of suitors that Jimmy Garoppolo has. So if the Jets were trying to get him in free agency, that they would have a better chance because there'd be less competition. Obviously, the specter of the injury, how long it's going to take to recover from, and how that will affect the player's performance has to be factored in. It's arguable that if Jameson Williams was not injured, that he might the Jets might have taken him at number 10 instead of Garrett Wilson. And we're all very happy that he was injured and the Jets did take Garrett Wilson at number 10.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Well, thank you to Johnny Jets, as always, reporting from Jets Universe. Thank you to Vinny and the Jets for the live question today. We love that one, getting a chance to talk about Jimmy G. Thanks for everybody watching. This has been NYJ Ground Crew. Flight Plan Friday. Big game against the Bills. And yes, if you believe in Mike White, like Johnny and I do, if you believe in this Jets defense, like Johnny and I do, there's a good chance we win that game. Johnny, as always, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Jets Universe.